So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak at this really wonderful event. And as I was sitting down listening to the previous speakers, I realized that perhaps maybe the most striking but not so striking difference might be that I am the immigrant in my family. So just to kind of give you a little bit of background, so I was born and raised in Ghana. And neither of my parents had received formal education, not even kindergarten. I have to say, though, that my appreciation for education, the value that was instilled in me was really from my parents, because they had seen firsthand what it looks like when someone does not have formal education. So as a very young child, my mom especially would always tell me that she never wanted to be the reason that none of her kids had education. And just to tell you a little bit of why she might not have received education. So my parents both grew up in families where formal education weren't necessarily the priority, because many of them, as kids, helped the parents on farms or at the market in whatever they sold to make money to help the family. So on my mom's side, it turned out that all of the boys were highly educated, and none of the girls were. So it just happened to be the culture in that environment at the time. So it was quite acceptable for women to not just not go to school. So my mom got married when she was very young, at the age of 15. She thought it was actually kind of old at the time. I have 5 brothers, which I'll kind of talk about that again, maybe in a little bit, and 1 sister. So she had a total 8 kids, lost 1. But growing up, she always felt that her parents had to make a choice between either having the kids help them so that they can support some of the kids to go to school, or just nobody else gets to go to school. So it just happened that just culturally, that was how a lot of families were raising their kids, that the girls would help the parents work to send the boys to school. But it also turned out that that experience really shaped, I feel that much of what I am, my values, my beliefs, have really been strongly influenced by her own experiences. She's told me so many stories, I cannot even tell you all of them, but I always just have a vision of my mom, and she tells me this, that her only experience with formal education was really watching other kids who were dressed up in their school uniforms going to school every day. So that image just kind of stuck with me since I was little, and I never wanted to be that person watching other kids go to school and not have that opportunity. And both my parents, especially my mom, did everything she could to make sure that in terms of going to school, it just had happened. And my only excuse, at least, had to be that, well, she made it very clear that you just had to do well. She would support us. So that also means that whenever I got my report card, nobody at home could actually read it or really understood. So you would think that if I kind of got a C or a D, it probably might not really matter. But she actually, every teacher I've had in my life, maybe except college and graduate school, knew my mom. Yeah. So that meant, and she didn't really have an understanding of what a 95 or 100 actually, she knew 100 is perfect, 0 is really nothing. And if you got a 99, that means you actually didn't understand something that was taught in class. So oftentimes, I think that now looking back, I find that I actually did try to work really hard, because explaining to my mom why I scored like a 97 on an exam was a lot harder than actually putting that effort into just studying and doing well. And I think it kind of paid off. just to so I migrated to the United States when I was just a teenager. So this was in 2000. And that was a very difficult time for a teenager to be away from their parents. But it also was that concept of recognizing opportunity. So for myself and my parents, we recognized that that was a huge opportunity for me. But that does not make it any easy. So one of the most memorable situations I have. So I went to a high school in New York called Williams H. Taft High School, not too far away from Bronx Science. And I remember when we were talking about going to Bronx Science, one of the reasons why I couldn't even go is because we couldn't afford the transportation to actually go to Bronx Science. So I went to Taft High School. And at Taft was actually, by a lot of standards in the United States, a really, really bad high school. And so, but for me, my perspective was very different because I came from a very, very different environment. One of the things that stood out to me was that I actually was super frustrated by not having school uniforms. So every morning, I had to actually think about what I had to wear. And that was kind of surprising to me because back in Ghana, it didn't matter if you went to public school or private school, you had school uniforms. So that was quite an adjustment. But perhaps one of the things that made me, one moment in my life that I think made me super sad was I was in high school when 9/11 happened. And specifically, I was in a music class. And I remember, because we were under 18, parents had to come to pick us up from school. And here I was in school. My parents were not there to come pick me up. So one of my friends' parents came to pick them up, and I don't know how, but we just lied that they were my parents too. So I just kind of got out with them. And I happen to be married now to that guy whose parents. Yeah, so you can imagine coming from Ghana, very tropical, and so by the way, I arrived in the United States in March, and I think now that I have a better sense of what winter is, I think March is fairly kind of nice, but at the time I thought it was I didn't know it gets colder than that. And so when I was from high school, of course, I went to upstate New York for undergraduate, where I majored in chemistry. And for graduate school, I visited Madison, Wisconsin, I think on a day that just happened to be unusually nice, but I had no idea that that was the case. So I loved the school, loved the faculty, and then decided that I wanted to go to Madison, Wisconsin for graduate school. And after I had signed everything off, someone actually was talking to me and said, "Where are you going for grad school?" And said, "Madison, Wisconsin." And the question I often get is that, "Did you lose a bet?" Yeah, yeah. So of course, besides the fact that it's a great school, that was probably when I really learned to tolerate winter. So you can. Perhaps I don't have to explain to you too much why I actually chose to come to Duke. Yeah. So I feel that many of the opportunities that have been afforded to me really has come from all, I think mentors in my life have really influenced a lot of my direction, especially career intellectually, but also kind of helped me just find, I'm not sure, for lack of better words, maybe say find my own voice in the scientific world. I feel like I gravitated towards science because I think that it was one of the environments where I felt that you really can do an excellent job, and it might not, it just is either you do well or not, and it comes across the way that it is. And so it's less political, in my view, at least. I can engage in science that's political or not, but I just felt that I gravitated towards science for many reasons, also because it just wanted environments that made me feel very welcome. That said, I find that every time I was in a room with scientists, you find individuals from all walks of life. And I think I never really thought about that per se as a factor that really influenced my career choice. But I really was moved by Lynn's lecture early on, because I feel like maybe it's one of those things that we think of intuitively, but don't actually necessarily recognize it until it's presented to us in the way that you did so eloquently. Other things that I wanted to talk about is how I even envision kind of mentoring in my own lab. I find that the different background that I've had has shaped how I approach science in general, and also how I hope to kind of cultivate a certain culture in my own lab. I think there's at least one student here from my lab, and really what I wanted to kind of highlight on that is that I find interdisciplinary science being basically strengthened by having individuals not just from different disciplines, but also having some of these different cultural perspectives really do help shape the strength of our science. And I tackle kidney disease in a way also because it's a very global problem. I didn't necessarily think that I wanted to just identify a global disease, but I find a lot of connection in individuals who develop kidney disease. About 10% of the world population suffer from kidney disease. And different countries might have different traits that actually lead to the disease, but ultimately, the United States, India, China, West Africa, all of these countries have this problem that I hope that the science that we perform here would be able to influence or kind of change the direction or advance medicine to help individuals all across the world. So going back to a story that I wanted to also tell, so again, I have 5 brothers. And you would think that when I was in New York City, when I thought about going for undergraduate in upstate New York, I kind of really wanted to get away from them in a little bit. And I should also point out that before I came here to the United States, some of my siblings were here. So now we're in a situation where my parents are, they come visit often, but they are in Ghana most of the time, and most of the kids are now here. But really, I think a lot of the times it was the teachers that I have actually encountered kind of growing up. I had wonderful experiences where one of my teachers actually pushed for my parents to have me just kind of really encourage my parents to have me get the opportunity to get education outside of Ghana, mainly because they felt that if I stayed there, I would probably be forced to get married. And so when I was in graduate school, I remember, so I managed to not get married until undergraduate and graduate school. I think my mom simply just got tired of me not being married in graduate school. So she said, okay, I think it's time now, even though she was really supportive, go get the education. And she said, okay, you should. And of course, I am married now, but dated for quite some time. And I brought this story back in just because it kind of contrasts with how young she was when she got married. And I feel that already at this stage in my life, I've gone through experiences that is a huge contrast with what she has experienced. But at my core, I really feel that much of me is really my mom. So, thank you.